Welcome to My Boulevard Podcast, where we talk about everyday issues from a biblical and balanced perspective. I'm Dhati Lewis, and this season we're diving into fighting for the faith in today's culture, navigating deconstruction and reconstruction, and featuring the voices of poets, pastors, practitioners, and polymaths. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy today's episode.
What's up, everyone? I am here with Pastor Rick Trotter. He is a dear friend of mine. He pastors a church on the same campus that we are in, the Stone Mountain campus. I've known his family, known his wife, his children for many years, and I'm excited about the conversation today. And it's not an exciting conversation, but it's a conversation that I think is needed. It's a conversation that is being had. So it's not like we're breaking ground on this conversation. It's being had in many places, but it's the first time that I've officially tried to talk about any of this. And it's for many different reasons. So today we're going to talk about the conflict of Israel and Palestine. And the reason why it's the first time that I've talked about it is because, it's something that it's important to me. I mean, it's something in so many different ways. It has impacted me. But you guys have heard me say before on this podcast that a problem is not a real problem until it's your problem. And the reason why I feel like we're talking about this versus talking about what's going on in Ukraine or what's going on in so many different other parts of the world is because this is a real problem for me. And it's become a real problem because something becomes a real problem through, I believe, two reasons, primarily through proximity. I live in the area in which it's a problem, or through relationship. And since I don't know any Ukrainians, I really don't know many Palestinians, but there is a relationship that is dear to me, that I love dearly, that it is something that has become dear to their hearts, and it's my daughter. And my daughter recently was suspended from UGA, and now and because of protesting for the rights of Palestinian students on UGA's campus, and that has just done a lot, both to our family, to her, and so many different things. And so I was just like, I told her, I was like, I want to research this. We've had disagreements in the past on lots of different things, but right now it is one of those things that are that she's just like, she feels like I've been too passive, if that's a word, when it comes to this. Like I'm being too passive. I'm not taking a stance. I'm not like, and it's just like, I don't know. And so sometimes I feel like, do I have to be pro-Palestinian or pro-Israel? And I was just like, and part of the times I was like, I don't know. And I just don't know. And so when I come and I look for people that can help me. And so Pastor Rick, you are here to help me and to help us just to process through this. And so I just appreciate you jumping on today.
My pleasure. I say that with tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
The idea, because it's definitely a controversial issue.
Yeah.
But I think people should share, at least to the degree that they can, a perspective, and that's all that I'm here to offer.
Yeah, well, that is the perspective, your perspective, that I want to hear, and your perspective that I want our people to hear, because I know your perspective comes with a lot of due diligence, a lot of prayerfulness, and just a pastoral heart. And I think that is critical for this, because I mean, would you say that are there winners and losers in this debate? Because that's the way it feels like you're either for me or you're against me. There's a winner and there's a loser. There's clear right and there's clear wrong, in here. But it's not that simple.
No, it's not. And generally war never is. And there's normally enough wrong to go around. And as a matter of fact, I think if we talk about war in general, we would have to say that war is normally the result of some failure, where people could not reach a peaceful agreement. And in a perfect world, if peaceful agreement could be reached, we wouldn't have war.
Yeah.
But we know from our history That's not reality. That unfortunate consequence is there, and so sometimes we're left with trying to sort through things and find out, well, is identify the truth. Why are we here? And unfortunately, that we do find that we come to places where war was the result, and we what we hope is um, that there is the goal of preserving life.
Mm-hmm.
Is that meaning that life is valued, and that people are doing everything that they can to value human life. And while it may sound like a slight contradiction in idea, war and saving human life, but that is often the dilemma that we're left with. Sometimes wars are fought because you love life,
Mm-hmm.
and but it's the way the world is.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we have to stop and pause, no matter if you're pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, no matter what, is that there are human lives being lost
Yes,
from both sides.
and the um, and my heart goes out because you say, well, yeah, there are lives being lost on both sides, but at some point, you when you see the human carnage, um, it's heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
When you see families disrupted, and just a human tragedy there, um, the passion around this issue is understandable for anybody that values human life. When you look at it, you should feel some kind of way.
Yeah.
And probably a greater sign of something being wrong is if people weren't passionate about the loss of human life.
Mm-hmm.
And but with anything, we need context. We need context. And with the way media is now, we get snapshots.
Mm-hmm.
We get to see the results of things. We don't necessarily know why they exist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the challenges that's there.
And so we're going to talk. We're going to talk about it. This is a real problem, real issues. People that are wrestling with, people are being affected by, And so just for the sake of the audience, and as we come, are you pro-Israel or pro-Palestine?
I would say I would like to be pro both.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is that I believe that I pray that there would be a peaceful solution.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize that there is not. If you say, and I don't think because I believe that some principles are being upheld and some principles are not being upheld, that I'm against someone.
Mm-hmm.
So I try not to be boxed into that.
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
As a because it would be like if I was dealing with a conflict with my children. I'm for both sides.
Yeah.
But somebody has made a decision that we have to try to sort through it and say, okay, this is where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would hope that on the other side that we're still a family. If that makes any sense. But
no, I think it makes perfect sense. I just feel like oftentimes in these conversations, like we are acting like we're forced to be one or the other, right? Like we're forced to either be pro-Palestine and pro-Israel. And here's the thing, like I got friends that I love. I got, like I've said, family. I've got people who are on both sides, right? And there'll be a lot more explicit in saying, no, I am pro this because of this, and so, and it feels like, and I oftentimes feel this pressure that I have to agree with the other person, especially when I know I'm not well informed. I mean, I know some things. I'm not like totally ignorant of the stuff, but I'm not well informed. I don't know all the different issues. And then, based upon who I'm talking to, I know I'm going to get one side and just all that side's information. So I do as much as I can, and I'll go study pro-Palestinian, blogs, and then I'll go study pro-Israel blogs and things, and it's just like, and it kind of reminds me of kind of surfing on the news when I'm on the news looking at CNN and Fox or whatever. Like, you choose to focus in on where your argument is the strongest and ignore the areas where you're not, you know.
Right.
And so I guess another way to kind of, think about, like, how have you kind of approached this situation of the conflict that's going on in the Middle East?
Well, I tried to look at context, and that recognizing that what we're seeing before us right now is a kind of a snapshot of something that has been going on for a long time. And from its inception, and it could be argued that it goes back even further than that, but from our modern time, what we know, it seems that it has started primarily after the war of 1918. And that's when Britain had control of the area after the war during the Ottoman Empire, and realized that there were two groups present in the land. And I think the decision that they made in terms of trying to understand the conflict, and then later in 1936, through the Peel Commission, deciding that the best solution was to try a two-state solution, meaning offer both people their own state, and that being a place where the conflict started, just between the two people groups.
Yeah. So how would you describe, for a layman, for someone who's learning this, the argument from both sides?
Well, let me clarify from two laymen's.
Okay. Yes.
There's this is purely sharing a perspective that's available to everyone.
Yeah.
In other words, fortunately for anyone who's concerned, information is available, meaning you can go online or Google or AI. There's information available. Doesn't mean that we would have all the truth. And when I say by truth, it's normally more than one perspective of an argument. And so that's what makes it so difficult, is because you have the information, but you don't necessarily have all the motives that led to that. But with that, and in layman's terms, is that that when that decision was made in terms of the people who had won the war, and this is unfortunately how things are decided before they left the area, what should happen, they decided that the best solution was to have a two-state solution, offering land to both parties. And
it's about Great Britain, who won the war. And we're in the 1900, you said 2019.
The war was won 1918.
1918.
But in 1936, when they looked at that there was still conflict there, and they did the Peel Commission went in to look at why was there conflict. They realized, okay, there are two people groups here, Arabs and Jews, and they decided that okay, well, a two-state solution was the idea, to divide up the land and give them their and actually statehood wasn't the issue there. It was just that land for the people groups. And the decision was made to give Israel an amount and to give the Arabs an amount. They didn't agree. So when 1947, later, when they decided to, that's when statehood became an issue.
Okay.
And Israel would be recognized as a state. And again, the Arabs did not agree.
And when you say statehood, that means officially like drawing up borders, drawing up lines. Is that what statehood means when you say statehood?
No, when I say statehood, I mean that they're recognized as a nation, as a people group.
Okay.
And they're given statehood, and so the land had pretty much been divided or by them years before that.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wasn't in an agreement.
Okay.
It was, according to the best information I could find, the offer was they gave 20% to Israel, they gave 80% to the Arabs. But it seems that the issue is on the 20% that Israel had.
Yep.
And so in 1947, when they were given statehood, when it became official in 1948, that's when the war started. Okay. And the fighting started.
Yeah.
And at that time, Jordan was occupying that space, but Israel won the war.
Okay. So so in 1948, because oftentimes people, and I've seen many YouTube arguments, whatever, this is not a biblical thing. Christians always want to make this a biblical thing. This is about statehood. This is about rights. This is about imperialism. This is about, all of that. And you even started off, it says, to some degree, the people who won the war, who was in possession in 1918, they were determining how to divide it, and how to make this work when you had two different people groups who historically don't like each other, what to do. So it's sort of like, you have kids, I have kids, you have two siblings that are sharing the same room and they're having problems. They're having problems with one another, right? And so two kids that have problems with one another, you as a parent, a lot of times there's no win.
Right.
To that situation. I don't know about your kids. You probably had great kids, but I had some kids that they had some problems with one another. I know I had some problems with my kids. Show, as you know, like for some times, I think he hated me for some time because I was that picker. I was that kid that was always like picking. I was a middle child. So what can I say? But anyway, getting back to this is something that is, you have the people who were ruling the land at the time, because they won the territory, having two people groups that did not like each other, trying to figure out how to let them get along, cooperate, and that's kind of by recognizing kind of the statehood. And so that in 1948, that's when the two-state solution started becoming a potential or a possibility.
Well,
is that when that happened?
Before 48, but rejected by Arabs. There's an argument out there, in all fairness, where people are saying, well, they were there, that Britain shouldn't have made a decision in terms of who would get what.
Right.
And so but they were trying to find a solution to say, well, okay, well, if we give you land and give you land, then y'all go from there.
Yep.
It wasn't accepted. And so the war started in 48, and in that particular conflict, Israel won the war.
Mm-hmm. Would people say, did they win the war because they had all the backing of the West?
No, according to information that's available that I could find, no one else got involved in the war. Mm-hmm. Meaning it was Egypt, Jordan. There were more than one Arab state that got involved in the war, mm-hmm. but Israel won the war.
Okay.
Meaning at this point, Britain didn't help them, and the United States didn't help them. They fought alone and they won.
Yeah.
And so that's that information. It should be available to anyone who would look.
Okay, so briefly, just take us through. So since 1948, take us until present day, for as much as you know of how do we get where we are today in the current conflict. So kind of take us through a quick timeline since then.
Well, at best I know, in terms of information that was available, is that 20 years later, from 1948 to 1967, there was another, I'll say, a roundup of nations that would decided that they would attack Israel again, with the goal of removing them from the land. You had Egypt again, Jordan, and at that time the Arabs that had been displaced in 1948, mm-hmm. because after the war, And the information that, again, the information that's available to everyone is that the Arab nations encouraged the people who are now referred to as Palestinians to move out of that region. They were planning to attack Israel. The idea was they will be eliminated, and then we can go back in. Well, the war didn't turn out that way. So when we come back to 1967, there's another plan to attack again, and that's the Six-Day War. Well, Israel won that war, and as a result of winning that war, they inhabited Gaza and the West Bank. And so that's in 1967. So they have both. But one of the things that was there for them is that the opportunity to try to find a peaceful solution. And again, there are those who say, well, they really didn't mean it. But the reality is that they came into possession of the land by winning the war. They were willing to trade the land back for peace, meaning, will this bring us to a place to where we're not fighting again? And that has been, you said, well, up to today. Well, there's a lot that happened in between there.
Right.
Terrorism grew, as many people are my age would remember the 1972 when the Sabian airline flight 571 was hijacked by terrorists that claimed to be Palestinians, and they hijacked a plane, and they wanted they separated the Israeli passengers and wanted to use them for bargaining, and Israel had a special force that came in that dealt with that issue, and that was 1972. Well, later that year at the Olympics, 11 people, the Israeli Olympic team were assassinated at the Olympics. It was 1972. The irony of that is that their current leader of Israel was one of those soldiers that was there as a 22-year-old. So it gives us some idea into the mindset of a person who has dealt with terrorism
their whole life.
Their whole life.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it right or wrong. It's a dynamic that I think plays into what we're actually seeing, and perhaps some of the perspective of how a person views it. What do you do with terrorism?
Yeah.
And but you said up to today. So from 1972 forward, there are probably some significant dates. The efforts of different American presidents, Jimmy Carter being one. We could probably another major one probably was the last one of the close to the last one, wasn't the last one. Bill Clinton, on the tail end of his administration, brought in the Jewish leader and the PLO leader, met at Camp David for 14 days. The information is that Israel said yes, the Palestinians said no. In all fairness, it was the people saying, well, that wasn't a workable deal or something that we felt
they didn't like the terms.
Right, they didn't like the terms.
Right.
So so you have from 1948 to the present at least 5 times that someone has come in, looked at it, offered a solution, and said, can we make a deal here for a two-state solution?
Right.
And
5 times rejected.
5 times rejected.
And what would and you kind of said it, like what somebody who was pro-Palestinian, just clearly they would say, like you said, it wasn't acceptable for Palestinians. But a lot of it is that, do you know if it's based upon because this is our land and outsiders don't need to be determining? Is that, I mean, what is the argument between the two, in the sense of why they're rejecting proposals where it seems like they were even giving more land than the other?
it seems the major issue being that it seems to stem around Jerusalem itself.
Yeah.
Um, Honestly, I can't understand it completely because in two of the solutions they offered half of Jerusalem,
Okay.
and I guess it wasn't the right half.
Right.
Now that's an oversimplification of something
Yeah.
that has some deep roots
Right.
in it. The question becomes, or that what is very difficult to understand is that when you have all, at least the world powers as we know them, and you say, well, you have a UN that has offered a solution, and that solution is not acceptable. Where else do you go? And the being where they are right now, like I said, those solutions, if they weren't agreeable to both sides, I'm not saying who was right and who was wrong.
Right.
I'm just saying that there has been efforts
To do it.
and there are those who would question if they were real efforts because we didn't like the conditions.
Right.
You're left with this, at least a part of the consideration is that, and where we started asking the question, what do you do when you can't find a peaceful solution? You end up with war.
Yeah.
And then when you have war and the war is decided, and now you're left with, say, well, what do you do? I still don't accept the terms of the war. Now you have active terrorism. What do you do with that?
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah. Can I talk? Because it seems to me, and this is really anecdotal, just me and my personal research and talking to people, it seems like the older generation, meaning let's just say even 45 and above, are more pro-Israel, and the younger generation, right, same around that same age and younger, are more pro-Palestinian. You've mentioned multiple times the idea of terrorism, and what do we do with terror and terrorism? And I know that is something that has marked a generation in the same way school shootings have marked Gen Z. In the same way, there's certain things, but I know, like for us that have lived through 9/11 and terrorist attacks and those types of things, Osama bin Laden and those types of things, it seems like that marks a generation. Do you think that this disagreement is a generational? Is divided generationally based upon like what season you are in life?
It will play a part in it, primarily because where we are today, when things happen, you see them.
Yeah.
You can see it. And for those of us who are older than 45, we've grown up with probably a different perspective. When I was in elementary school, our school had a bomb shelter because we knew that Russia had access to a nuclear bomb, and we were their enemy.
Yeah.
And so we grew up with that, and we understood that we had regular weekly drills that if we were under attack.
Bomb shelter, yeah.
And so that's what we grew up with. So we understood that there was, the world is not a perfect place. You can't always negotiate what you wish you could negotiate, and you're left with war. For my generation, we've gone through that. We've gone through, we've seen other wars, and we've also gone through, I understand that 9/11 represents, that was what, 23 years ago.
I was married 11 days after 9/11.
And so I remember the feeling that on 9/11, walking into a room and thinking that a crop duster had crashed into one of the towers, and seeing that this looks much bigger than that, and then seeing the other plane come in, and other jetliner come into the other tower, and being in shock.
Yeah.
And standing there watching this, because you recognize in that moment, wait a minute, those two buildings employ about 50,000 people. and there's an average of about 150,000 people in the mall area that pass through on a daily basis. We had no idea how many people were going to actually die in that moment. And so, being at that time a middle-aged person, I remember having a conversation with another gentleman who was close to my age, and we both were talking about signing up. Why? We're not people who, we're not even soldier age per se. But the idea is, you don't, when you're being attacked, you recognize that things have changed, and there's something. So that mindset is probably a little different from someone who's never had that as a present moment or a reality, that recognizing there are people who don't like you, and that's an understatement, but the reality that they would be willing to do you harm.
Yeah.
Living with that reality that the world is not a loving place.
Yeah.
And you being left with sometimes with few options. And so for us, and as Americans, we had a decision to make after that attack of what to do next. And people are still arguing about if it was the right decision. But the question becomes, how do you respond to a terroristic attack?
Yeah.
We lost 3,000 people that day.
Yeah. Yeah. And so in here, we've talked about just like the amount of Israel's, like Palestinians and Israelites, Jews that have been killed, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, of people who have been killed. But it's in that we're talking about, like, is there a Christian, let me just say this, is there a Christian way to view this? And again, I know that there's a Christian way, but like, is it like one way or the other? Because I have Christians that are pro-Palestinian, right? And I have Christians that are pro-Israel, and all of that. But oftentimes it gets resorted to kind of, this is a biblical conflict, and they go back to Hagar and Ishmael and Isaac, and just the beginning, and all of that. How do you wrestle with this biblically? When it comes to just our vantage points as believers, addressing this issue.
Well, for me, I think that's I don't think that's the best way to view it, because you don't want to excuse evil from anyone, and especially say, well, if it's legitimate evil, even if they have a biblical name, it's still evil.
Yeah.
And so I try not to go there, meaning that we should be able to look at it and let it stand on its own. Yeah. For instance, when we were attacked on 9/11, the Christian view for me was, do I need to sign up?
Yep.
We're under attack. And this is not necessarily a direct correlation, but I think we could acknowledge this. The largest loss of American lives in any war was the Civil War, meaning the war among us.
Yep. Yep.
And particularly for Black people, that was an issue. You say, well, I don't know what their heart motives were, but I know the net result was our freedom. So how do I feel about it as a Christian? I feel like they made the right decision. 600,000 people died. Would I, as a Christian, prefer that 600,000 people die? No. Was there another solution? None came forward. Do I enjoy my freedom? Yes, I do. It's interesting that a few months ago, we celebrated Juneteenth. Yeah. Juneteenth essentially is an acknowledgement of a warrior in this regard. That a war-weary nation had to make a decision. The war is over, we won the war, but there's a group here that won't let the people go.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah.
Well, you send 2,000 soldiers, and many of them were volunteers. Many of them were black volunteers joined in this 2,000 soldiers. They go down to Texas and they say, you have to let the rest of these people go. You say, do they want to fight another fight? Do you want more people to die?
Yeah.
Well, they were unwilling to accept them not being free. That's not an easy decision. That's not a decision that you want to have to make. But I would say on this end, and I'm grateful that they made that decision.
Right.
And so that's the hard dilemma of what war does.
So, this has been really, really helpful, and I really appreciate you educating me in this. I know some of my friends and people that are pro-Palestine would say, well, this is not like a war because there's not a nation state for Palestinians, and it seems like the whole of the Western world is supplying Israel with weapons, weapons and things that is going. So it's not fair. This is genocide. You've heard that word. This is genocide. This is them trying to eradicate a people. And we as a nation are behind this genocide. What is your perspective on that?
And my son and I had a conversation about this in terms of genocide. And when I went back to look at the definition of genocide that came out of World War II, it doesn't fit that. This is not a people who are trying to eliminate a people group. This is a people who have determined, and this is where it gets difficult, because with any war, and when I use the word war because that means there are opposing sides, that someone is making a decision, what's in your best interest to protect your people in future. You may not be right, you may be wrong, but you're making a decision. And what we see here is that if it was genocide, you say, well, they have the ability to just eliminate people. They had that ability before October 7th. Mm-hmm. That's not what was happening.
Yeah.
And so they said, well, we've come to the conclusion that this area can't be occupied because this is where we're being attacked from, the area in Gaza. And this is something that, people look at that both ways. You say, well, the Gaza was yours since 2005. What did you develop? What was developed? We know that there are tunnels.
Yeah.
The tunnels were developed from which Israel is attacked from. Mm-hmm. So you say, well, how do you create a genocide by waiting until you're attacked? That's not normally how that happens. Yeah. So the classic definition of genocide would be like where it came out of some of the Nazis regime, when they slaughtered people who were not combatants. They were not military people. They were not involved. Similar to what Saddam Hussein did when there were people who were fleeing. In other words, they're leaving. They're trying to leave this area, and you're killing them. Yeah. And so that's different. If you have people that are leaving, and if your goal is say, well, this is the space that we need cleared, and you're willing to let them go, you let them know you're coming, you ask them to leave the area, whether you think they should leave or not, you have to say the effort is made to spare lives. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things we look for, is say, is there any effort? Is there any restraint? Is there any, are you just recklessly trying to terminate this group of people? Mm-hmm. Or is there an objective of saying that, okay, we've done this route, we gave up this land, and it hasn't brought peace.
Yeah.
And so I think in that case, it would not fit.
The
It would not
genocide?
fit the criteria of
Yeah.
genocide.
All right. Well, I mean, I can go on and on because I got 1,000,001 questions. But here's the question that I do want to ask. When it comes to a way forward, not a way forward in solving the conflict, right? There has been a call for the divestment of anybody who's supporting Israel. There's been a call for, what is the way forward for us as believers in North America specifically? For us to do and to engage in such tragedy that has taken place in the Middle East. What can we do, and what would your recommendation be?
Well, let me start by saying I'm not qualified.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll share a perspective in that this is what makes it so complicated. Israel is an ally, meaning the United States has an ally, meaning we have a common goal and a common agreement. Doesn't make everything that they do right. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with everything that they do. We do believe that they are a faithful ally and have represented our interests in that region. We know that we have enemies in that region as well. We came through an Iraqi war that many people thought was a completely unnecessary war. Iran has shown. I think they've expressed their feelings for the United States. So when you look at all of that, and it goes even further, and you could even go to Russia and others, and there are many that think that something like this could lead to World War III, because that's how involved it is and intertwined. So I wouldn't pretend to know how to untangle that.
Right.
I don't believe that we should make a decision to divest from someone who is an ally, because when we went through the Gulf War, one of the things that happened there is that even countries that we had helped, like France, they wouldn't allow us to fly over their airspace. Well, that means we had to take another route. Because we were convinced that we have to go, this needs to be done. So with that, when you have countries that have decided that this is in our best interest, everybody may not agree. And so by divesting from Israel, we would be saying that you're wrong, and leaving them vulnerable to others. So in that case, I would say I don't think that's our place to do that. No more than it would be someone else, another country, to tell us how we should respond to 9/11. You can't go. You can't go over here. What you can't do, because I see that as a similar thing. That when you have a country that is making a decision, that's responding to something that they feel that they have to respond to, that's in their best interest of their future.
It's important to stay with them, the
Yeah.
allies. So would you say and again, this is more super hypothetical, but is that the same? So if we were hypothetically an ally of Palestine, we would remain an ally? Is that?
Well, actually, the United States is still one of the largest supporters of the Palestinian people. They're the only group. Well, I wouldn't say the only group. Let's just say this. From what I could understand from the research, is that the Palestinian refugees are being supported by the UN, and the United States is one of the largest contributors to their support right now. So we're doing what you were. We're doing both at the same time.
That's good. Yeah.
And there's also, and this question would be there, what the real numbers are. But Israel has been a humanitarian aid to Palestine and to Palestinians, and I know that finding the true numbers is very difficult, because there are different reasons. But So there are people who are actually looking at both sides. It doesn't take them off the hook in terms of what's right and what's wrong, but it says that there is the effort to where when you look at it, you say, well, you're trying to do two things at one time.
Yeah.
And
Well, this is very hopeful. I'm grateful. I hope that you've been listening to this, that you hear Pastor Rick's heart, my heart. In this, we did not come on here to try to solve the world's problems. We did not.
not at all.
We did not. This is two people, and I'm very grateful, Pastor Rick, you joining and being a part of this, because I feel like this was a conversation that is needed to have, because oftentimes a lot of people that I'm running into are like me, where I'm learning, I'm investigating, and I know you in a similar way, but I have done a lot of the research and have done some research that is available to all of us, online. And because at the end of the day, we have to figure out how we're going to continue to engage and to live in such a broken world,
World.
and I think that is the reality. Unfortunately, people are dying, in this during this time, and the stakes are really high. They're really high, and so we just wanted to talk. And we wanted to open that talk up to you. If you have comments, please email us, or if you put it in the chat. And we just pray that this was helpful.
Amen. And it is, again, just in closing, or it's not an easy thing to navigate. And I know that whenever we see the number of people dying that are dying, I would pray that people would be brokenhearted by it. War is heartbreaking, and my prayer would be, is that there would be a peaceful solution.
Yeah.
There's a reality. There's a 77-year history that we're seeing that's going on there, that the rest of the world hasn't been able to figure out how to solve.
Yeah.
And it's tragic. It's not the only tragic situation as the world exists. We know that, if I can give one more example of something that it's like, really, this is when in the course of options and trying to figure out what should we do, United States was in a space that it's not talked about a lot. In 1962, you say, well, what would make you risk everything in this moment? Well, in 1962, October 27th, you had a submarine that was approaching Cuba. You had a United States ship that started dropping depth charges to cause, hopefully, to surface.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that submarine is carrying nuclear torpedoes.
Mm-hmm.
I was alive,
Mm-hmm.
know anything about it. So you say, well, okay, this submarine has a decision to make. Do I fire and start World War III? And where do I fire that missile? Do I bomb? Do I fire it to Florida? Where do I?
Yeah.
Millions
Right.
of people.
Impact. Yeah.
And you say, well, the United States, do I let them continue on their journey to Cuba and continue to build nuclear weapons in Cuba, which could reach the United States in short order?
Mm-hmm.
The decision was made. This is the line. We put everything on the table. We can't continue. We can't allow this to continue. You say, well, wait a minute, you're putting half the world almost at jeopardy.
Yeah.
In this decision. It's the world that we live in.
Yeah.
That day, that submarine, the vote was 2-1, meaning there were 3 decision makers on that submarine. 2 of them said, push the button, fire the missile. one person said, don't do it, wait. Well, we're here and we're having this conversation
because
because they didn't push the button. But for most of us, we don't realize what a dangerous world we live in. And that and especially today, that there's nuclear capabilities that many of the decisions that we're making, they can affect the lives of many people. And so that's why when we look at there's war, there's terrorism, all of that plays a part in it. And in some cases we say, well, some people don't observe the rules of war. And it makes it a very dangerous world. And so we continue to pray that somehow we will find peace, and that we will make better decisions, and that and pray that all of us would have a higher view of the value of human life.
That's good. We'll end on that note that we would all celebrate and embrace the Imago Dei. We would all have a value on human life, because that's really what this is about. And so thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Pastor Rick. And until next time.